Well, welcome everyone to the first Herbert C. Kelman seminar of the semester, and we're so delighted that you're here with us and that you've chosen to take time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. And I have a feeling you're not going to be disappointed because my dear friend and colleague Dr. Sousan Abadian has a wonderful presentation for you today. Let me just say a couple of things. First, this seminar is co-sponsored by the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School and the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. I wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded. So if you want to take another look at it once we put it up, give us a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, and take a look on the PON website, and you'll see you can watch it again there, or maybe some of your friends would like to watch it who weren't able to make it today. And I'm just really grateful to this team that we have. It's an amazing team, and it does take a village to pull off one of these seminars. So thank you, everybody, Nicole, Bryant, Riley, Luis, and Lara. It's just it's a wonderful team, and I feel so grateful to be able to have this seminar once a month with Program on Negotiation. And let me just say a little bit about the format. So what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce, first of all, read some of Sousan's biography, and then we will turn it over to Sousan, and she will give a talk for about 40 minutes, after which there will be a Q&A, but we don't want you to put the questions in the chat function, put it in the Q&A function. And I am going to read the questions to Sousan, and I'll read them one by one. So, and then after that, we'll have Nicole Bryant come on and just say a couple of words about upcoming events. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And as I said, we're delighted to have Dr. Sousan Abadian with us. She's an old friend and an old colleague, and we've been working together for a very long time. And I'm just delighted that she was able to take time out of her busy schedule to be with us here. The title of her talk, as you know, was Women, Life, Freedom. Iran's Crisis is a civilizational reckoning. And I'm just going to read her bio and then turn this session over to her. Dr. Sousan Abadian currently serves as the executive director of the Interfaith Council of Metropolitan Washington. She earned her PhD in political economy and government from Harvard University, and an MA in the Anthropology of Social Change and Development department, also at Harvard, and as well an MPA in International Development from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She authored the book Generative Cultural Renewal, an effective resource in ending female genital mutilation and other harmful practices. That came out in 2022. Which offers an ethical and culturally sensitive means of evolving harmful traditional practices. In 2022, she was a Fulbright Scholar in the Specialist Program in Canada, consulting with First Nations on international baccalaureate curriculum, Indigenous Perspectives in a Changing World. Her earlier research on healing the effects of long-standing collective trauma and cultural damage to indigenous communities was described by Nobel laureate in economics Amartya Sen as pioneering and highly original work. In June 2019, Dr. Abadian served as a Franklin Fellow at the U.S. State Department's Office of International Religious Freedom, Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. Her portfolio included presenting violent extremism, rights of religious minorities in the Middle East and South Asia, gender-based violence, and cultural restoration following atrocities. She has served as a fellow at MIT's Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values, and as well at Harvard Center for Public Leadership. She also teaches, coaches, and consults internationally on leadership building on her earlier work with Cambridge Leadership Associates, facilitating workshops and speaking on adaptive leadership. Well, she certainly comes well informed to this a very important topic. And I am going to turn off my camera. And Sousan, my friend, there you are. You can turn your camera on. Very good. All right. And the rest of us are going to turn our cameras off. And it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And I'm really grateful to Dr. Hicks for inviting me to speak today. Donna, as she said, and I go back a long time. She's one of my dear friends, knows me and my work intimately. And I also had the privilege of knowing Herb Kelman and his wife Rose and sharing slices of pie in their home. So to be here speaking in a forum that carries his name feels deeply meaningful. In some ways, it feels like a homecoming. Before I begin, I want to say something personal. For many of us in the Iranian diaspora, we're not absorbing the physical blows of this regime, but we're not untouched. We wake up each morning to videos of young people beaten, imprisoned, killed. We watch parents bury children. We scroll through grief that does not stop. And for me, it is excruciating to bear witness to what my people are undergoing, and to feel at times so far from it and so powerless to intervene. There's a particular kind of anguish in loving a country and a people you can't protect. So having said that, my goal today is that by the end of our time together, you will see what's unfolding in Iran a little differently, not simply as political or economic unrest, but something that reaches far beyond the daily headlines. Let's look at some of those headlines. Riley, if you could put up slide 1, please. Thank you. Many of you know that in September of 2023, a 22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman named Jina Mahsa Amini was arrested by Iran's morality police for wearing her hijab improperly. She was beaten and she died in custody. Her death ignited nationwide protests and ignited a chant that has now traveled the world. Zendegi, Azadi. Woman, life, freedom. Less well known outside Iran is its masculine counterpart, Mard, Mihan, Abadi. Man, nation, revitalization. And that matters because Iranian men have not been absent from this movement. Many have stood and continue to stand beside their sisters, wives, daughters, and friends. This is not a woman versus men story. It's something broader, a people reclaiming dignity together. The 2023 uprising was not the first mass protest in Iran, and like those before it, it was met with violence. Yet it did not end. The movement has continued, surfacing in waves, adapting, reforming, returning again and again. In December of 2025, hundreds of thousands of Iranians once again poured into the streets of all over Iran. And a few short weeks later, in January of 2026, true to form, the regime responded with extraordinary brutality. What matters for our purposes today is not only the violence itself, although it is devastating, but what the violence reveals. When a state must rely primarily on coercion to sustain itself, the problem is no longer policy failure. The problem is a collapse of legitimacy. From a distance, this may look like another authoritarian crackdown, but what we are witnessing is not simply repression. The regime is no longer governing by consent or persuasion, but by fear. And this is where I want to widen the frame. The uprising in Iran is often described as economic frustration or generational rebellion or a human rights struggle. It is all of those things. But the hypothesis I want to advance today is that what we're witnessing in Iran is also something deeper, a civilizational reckoning. It's not merely a negotiation about reforms within the political system. Iranians are in the process, I believe, of renegotiating their identity and the moral foundations of legitimate authority. Before going further, let me situate myself in this story. And Riley, I'm sorry, you can stop sharing the, thank you. Let me situate myself in this story and the lens through which I see it. I was born in Iran, came to the US as a child when my father, who was a development economist, was hired by the World Bank here in Washington, D.C., where I'm speaking from today. I spent half my childhood in Iran and other half in Bethesda, Maryland. I was born into the Zoroastrian community. At that time, roughly 20,000 people in Iran, the small remnant of an indigenous religious civilization that shaped Iran for over a millennium, yet had become a vulnerable minority in its own ancestral homeland. I share this not as a badge of grievance. For much of my youth and adult life, I was simply proud to be Iranian and Zoroastrian, but I really didn't think about it too deeply. My father, who was a profound influence on me, had himself been influenced by Gandhi and had lived in India during India's independence movement. So I was raised in an atmosphere of the oneness of humanity, never in terms of us and them. Religion was not my primary lens. At Swarthmore College and then Harvard University, my training was in anthropology and sociology, economics, and political development, as well as leadership studies. And I began my career working in international development with the most impoverished, mostly rural women and children across West Asia and Africa. Over time, as I began working with indigenous communities, I developed expertise in intergenerational collective trauma, how histories of colonization and repression shape not only individuals, but entire cultures with social, economic, and political ramification. More importantly, I think, I came to understand what it takes to support sociocultural healing and renewal. My book, entitled Generative Cultural Renewal, is in part about that. It was only later, working alongside indigenous peoples in North America, that I began to see my own ancestral story differently. Their narratives of erasure, survival, and renewal resonated with me almost viscerally. All this to say that when I look at Iran today, I do so through a lens informed by decades of research in development, trauma, and cultural renewal. And as someone who leads an interfaith organization, let me be clear. Today I am speaking about a regime, not Islam as a faith. About what happens when religion is fused with coercive state power. I want to explore why this uprising feels different and why its language has taken such a deep root among Iranians. And to do that, we must first confront a familiar narrative, advanced by the regime and echoed elsewhere, that this movement is a cultural import, a product of foreign influence, and therefore suspect. Let me examine that claim. In the West, the woman life freedom movement has been described as a product of social media, or global feminism, or foreign interference. In well-meaning circles, the shorthand is, this is Iran's feminist awakening. This is Iran catching up. This is the Gen Z revolution. The Iranian regime, and interestingly, some in the West frame it in more sinister ways, as infiltration, moral corruption, a Western imperialist, even Zionist plot. But when you listen carefully to the language emerging from the streets, it does not sound imported or plotted. Let me show you something emblematic of what has been circulating widely in recent months. In this clip I'm about to show you, the symbols on the cleared map of Iran evoke the era of Cyrus the Great, a pre-conquest, pre-Islamic moment in Iranian history. The Faravahad in the corner, an ancient Zoroastrian emblem, one I'm wearing right now, signals that lineage explicitly. The mythical bird Gharnus, the Iranian phoenix, thousands of years old, lands on Borj Azadi, Freedom Tower in Tehran. You'll notice the people are dressed in tribal attire and modern clothing both. Some women cover their hair, others do not. This pluralism remains aspirational. Riley, if you could show the video on slide 2, please. Thank you. These symbols are not nostalgia or incidental. They deliberately invoke a civilizational layer that predates the current regime. But symbolism alone is not evidence. Let's turn from imagery to data. The third slide, please, Riley. There is an independent research group called GAMAN, or G-A-M-A-A-N, the Group for Analyzing and Measuring Attitudes in Iran. Because conducting honest surveys inside Iran is nearly impossible under state control, they used anonymized online methods designed to protect respondents. In 2020, almost 5-6 years ago, they conducted one of the largest surveys of religious belief ever undertaken among Iranians, with over 50,000 respondents. The results were striking. Officially, Iran is described as 99% Muslim, but in this survey, only 32% identified as Shia and about 5% as Sunni. A significant portion described themselves as non-religious. Others identified as atheists, others as spiritual but not religious. And a small but meaningful percentage explicitly identified as Zoroastrian, far more than the official figures acknowledge. Notably, nearly half reported that they had left their birth religion. Now remember, this data is in 2020 and precedes the woman life freedom movement, and most definitely before the most recent protests. I wonder what the data would show us now. Of course, all surveys have limitations, but GAMAN's methodology has been peer-reviewed and internationally recognized, and even allowing for margins of error, the direction of change is unmistakable. There's a profound internal shift underway, not imported, not orchestrated from abroad, internal. And this shift is not limited to religious beliefs. Slide 4, please. In a subsequent GAMAN 2022 survey of over 150,000 respondents inside Iran, 81% said they would vote no to the Islamic Republic in a free referendum. Only 15% said they would vote yes. That's figure 1 on the left. Now, figure 2 on the right show that regardless of age, region, education, and gender, the views were consistent. The point is that this is not marginal dissent. This is a legitimacy crisis. Could stop the slide now. Thank you. This helps explain why the movement feels different from the earlier protests. The 1999 student protests demanded reform. The 2009 Green Movement demanded electoral integrity. The 2017 and 2019 protests appear to be largely economic. But the Woman Life Freedom Movement is not asking for adjustments within a system. I'm suggesting that it is questioning the moral foundation of the system itself. Increasingly, some Iranians describe life under the current regime in terms of occupation, experiencing the government as hostile, foreign to their values, and imposed upon them. And when that shift in language occurs, you're no longer negotiating policy. You are confronting a crisis of legitimacy. Here's a poem and arrangement that captures some of these sentiments. We'll just listen to the first verse of the poem. Riley, if you could put the next slide up. And the first verse of the poem is, "Strangers are in Iran, our children, drive them out." Go ahead and play it, please.
بیگانه در ایران است فرزند برونش کن بیگانه در ایران است فرزند برونش کن آغشته به خون گشتی آلوده به خونش کن آغشته به خون گشتی آلوده به خونش کن.
Okay, stop it now. Thank you. But disillusionment and a sense of occupation alone does not generate a movement with this kind of moral language. It does not explain why the chant centers on woman, life, freedom. You can stop sharing this slide, please. At first glance, these words may sound Western. These are often narrated as modern, Enlightenment, liberal values. So it's easy, especially from afar, to assume that Iran is simply absorbing Western norms. But we should pause before making that assumption. The West does not hold a monopoly on the language of dignity, nor did the Declaration of Freedom of Beliefs and Conscience originate in Paris, Geneva, Washington, or New York City. Also, the celebration of life on earth is not a modern invention. When Iranians chant woman, life, freedom, they're not quoting a European manifesto. They're speaking in Persian, in Kurdish, in the languages of Iran, in the language of their own civilization. They're invoking a moral vocabulary that resonates deeply inside their own historical memory. So what deeper layer of Iranian civilization might this language be drawing from? To understand what may be resurfacing, we have to go back long before 1979, long before the Islamic Republic, long before the Safavids, the dynasty that formally established Shia Islam as the state religion in the 16th century, and long even before the Islamic conquest of the 7th century. For more than a millennium before Islam, the Iranian plateau was shaped by a moral and cosmological vision rooted in Zoroastrian thought. And Zoroastrianism was not merely a private faith. It shaped law, governance, art, architectural ritual. It shaped the moral imagination of society, and at its heart was a radical idea for the ancient world, that human beings possess freedom of choice. In this vision, human beings are not born stained or condemned. There is no doctrine of original sin. We're born capable of choosing well or choosing poorly. Morality is not reduced to an exhaustive list of prohibitions. Instead, we are expected to cultivate discernment, to reflect, to weigh, to deliberate, and to choose between good and evil with awareness. The central ethical triad, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, did not outsource responsibility to authority. It placed moral responsibility squarely on the individual. Human beings were not wards to be supervised. They were moral agents empowered with choice. And this applied to women as well as men. From the earliest days of the tradition, both girls and boys underwent initiation into the faith, marking them equally as moral participants in the covenant of truth. In the Gathas, the oldest hymns of Zoroastrianism attributed to the founding prophet Zarathustra, men and women are addressed together. For example, in advice he gives to brides and grooms, he does so symmetrically, not obedience on one side and authority on the other, but mutual ethical partnership grounded in what Zoroastrians called asha, truth and right order. Marriage in this vision was not structured as male guardianship. It was structured as shared ethical responsibility. Later Avestan texts, the broader body of Zoroastrian sacred scriptures, pray for, quote, a good ruler, man or woman, unquote, taking for granted that women could govern. Women served in ritual roles in a tradition where fire represents truth and divine presence. In some cases, women guarded the highest sacred fires, a role symbolizing custodianship of divine light itself. And that's not a minor symbolic detail. To guard the sacred fire is to stand at the center of religious authority. Right, if you could show slide 6, please. This is how pre-conquest Iranian women are depicted. Beyond religion, Iranian women could own property in their own names. They controlled estates independently, even after marriage. Marriage did not dissolve their legal identity. They retained economic personhood. They could inherit, they could manage wealth, they could direct labor. And archaeology confirms what the texts imply. The Persepolis fortification tablets, administrative records from the 5th century BCE, that's over 2,500 years ago, they show women as wage earners, supervisors, estate managers, business owners. They received equal pay in rations and silver. They issued orders under their own seals. They commanded work crews that included men. They received additional provisions during pregnancy and after childbirth, recognition of maternity within the economic order. Now, it helps to situate this historically. You can unshare the slide. Thank you. In classical Athens, often celebrated as the cradle of democracy, women could not vote, could not own property independently in most cases, and were largely confined to domestic life. In contrast, Persian administrative records show women directing estates, authorizing transactions, and participating visibly in economic governance. Now, ancient Iran was not modern. It was not egalitarian in the contemporary sense, but it did not build its legitimacy on the theological, economic, or political subordination of women. And it's important to remember that this was not confined to a distant ancient past. Women's legal and economic autonomy persisted through successive Iranian empires, Achaemenid, Seleucid, Parthian, and into much of the Sasanian era, well into the 6th century. The more pronounced narrowing of women's independent mobility, business authority, and marital choice is generally associated by historians with the transformation that followed the Arab conquest of the 7th century and the gradual consolidation of more restrictive legal interpretations. In other words, the contraction of women's sovereignty was not original to Iranian civilization. It emerged after conquest. The same ethical vision that shaped gender relations in the time of Cyrus the Great also informed political authority. Slide 7, please. From the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean, the Achaemenid Empire governed one of the largest and most diverse territories the world had ever seen. What distinguished it was not only its scale, but its method of rule. Cyrus, Koresh in the Talmud, Kurosh in Persian or Farsi, did not impose religious uniformity. He did not erase local traditions or demand theological submission. He practiced restraint. Just as individuals were understood to possess freedom of conscience, so too were communities permitted to sustain their own traditions. When Babylon fell in 539 BCE, he restored temples rather than destroy them. He reinstated priesthoods rather than humiliating or killing them. He honored local gods rather than erasing them. He authorized the return of displaced peoples, including Jewish community, and supported the rebuilding of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. We know this not only from later historical memory and his mention in the Talmud, this Hebrew Bible, but from the Cyrus cylinder itself, a clay inscription discovered in Babylon in which Cyrus presents himself not as a conqueror imposing uniformity, but as the ruler restoring dignity and allowing communities to worship according to their own customs. Now, the cylinder is sometimes described as the first Declaration of Human Rights. That may be modern language applied retroactively, but it is certainly one of the earliest surviving imperial statements affirming cultural and religious recognition rather than forced conformity. And that matters because it tells us that restraint, pluralism, and respect for difference were not modern Western inventions grafted onto Iran. The language of dignity did not enter Iran from outside. It has roots in its own soil. In an ancient world where empire often meant erasure, this was distinctive. This was far from modern democracy, but neither was it theocratic domination. It was a civilizational experiment in ruling vast difference without demanding religious sameness. And beneath it all lay a moral grammar, freedom of conscience, responsibility for one's choices, shared ethical agency. Iran began as a civilization shaped by a distinct ethical vision, and when Islam arrived, it encountered a society already deeply formed. Over centuries, Iran became Muslim, but it did not cease to be Iranian. When Arab armies defeated the Sasanian Empire in the 7th century, it was not a gentle transition of power. Cities fell after prolonged siege. Political elites were displaced or executed. Administrative structures were dismantled. Persian lost its status as a language of governance. replaced by Arabic under the early caliphates. The old order collapsed. You can stop sharing. Thank you. The Iranian scholar Abdul Hossein Zarinkub later described the period that followed as 2 centuries of silence because Iranian political sovereignty vanished, its elites were sidelined, and its civilizational voice receded under foreign rule. This period of dislocation and humiliation was a profound rupture in continuity. Nevertheless, Iranian bureaucratic classes gradually re-entered imperial administration under the Abbasids. A new form of Persian Dari emerged, written in Arabic script, yet preserving Persian grammar and Persian worldview. Ferdowsi's Shahnameh resurrected pre-Islamic memory in epic form, weaving a civilizational narrative that conquest had attempted to sever. The intellectual flowering, often labeled the Islamic Golden Age, drew deeply from Iranian scholars and institutions such as Gundi Shapur, a renowned pre-Islamic academy of medicine, philosophy, and science, as well as from older ethical commitments to knowledge, order, and inquiry. Older ethical sensibilities filtered into Persian poetry, mysticism, celebrations, and the reverence for light. That deeper layer did not disappear. It receded, but it endured. In contrast to countries like Egypt and Syria, which underwent rapid linguistic and cultural Arabization, Iran absorbed Islam without dissolving into Arab identity. It integrated and then reasserted. This pattern, conquest followed by cultural resurgence rather than disappearance, is not incidental. It is civilizational, and it suggests that what we are witnessing today may be a recurrence. Iran has been conquered before, but it has never been erased. So when Iranians chant woman, life, freedom, it may sound modern, but listen again. Woman, life, freedom. These are not foreign imports. They are echoes of a much older inheritance. If the West has played a role, it has not been as originator, but as amplifier, echoing values with deep indigenous roots in Iranian civilization. What we may be witnessing then is not cultural imitation, nor is it the revival of something forgotten. These values never vanished, nor the traditions based on these values. The regime has failed to prevent pre-Islamic traditions like the Persian New Year, Nowruz, or others like winter solstice, holiday of Yalda, or Sadeh. Poetry was not silenced, dance and song persisted, and even the quiet defiance of gathering at Cyrus's tomb has continued despite discouragement. Every year around October 29th, the unofficial Cyrus Day, thousands attempt to gather at the tomb of Cyrus the Great in Pasargadae and at Persepolis, and every year the state grows uneasy. In recent years, authorities have repeatedly restricted access to these sites, treating large gatherings as politically threatening. Roads are blocked, security forces deployed, sites closed before crowds can assemble. Now, why would a 2,500-year-old tomb provoke such anxiety? Because these gatherings are not antiquarian nostalgia. In 2016, significant anti-regime chants erupted at Cyrus's tomb, an episode that preceded and helped catalyze the broader protests of 2017 and 2018. The state noticed. Since then, access to Persepolis and other ancient sites has been routinely curtailed, particularly around Nowruz. Even Sadeh, an ancient Zoroastrian fire festival, has become a site of protest in recent years, with its bonfires serving as symbols of resistance. Riley, if you could show slide 8 in the video, thank you. Thank you. You can stop that now. Historians note a revealing tension. While the Islamic Republic seeks to cultivate a transnational Islamic ummah beyond its borders, many Iranians continue to reaching for a national and civilizational identity rooted within their own history and homeland. Here are images and a video of the 2016 gathering around Cyrus's tomb. If you can show the next video, please. The people are chanting, Kurosh, Cyrus is our father. Iran is our homeland. Thank you. Stop that now. A society is drawing more deliberately from its deeper civilizational inheritance. And when a people begin to speak consciously from that deeper layer, the tensions become seismic. In other words, this is not merely a political or economic crisis. The current movement marks a civilizational fault line, not between East and West, not between Islam and modernity, but between two moral orientations competing to define Iran's future. Let me be clear about what that means and what it does not. This is not a struggle between Zoroastrianism and Islam. Islam in Iran has never existed in a vacuum. It absorbed and took root in Iranian civilization. There are Islamic traditions, philosophical, mystical, reformist, that resonate deeply with the older Iranian ethical imagination, conscience, justice, beauty, pluralism. The fault line is not between Muslims and non-Muslims. It is between authoritarian interpretations of religion, of any religion, and a broader moral inheritance that leaves space for dignity, responsibility, and choice. For any future Iran to flourish, those who continue to identify themselves as Muslim must see themselves in that future. Roughly a third of Iranians still identify as Muslim. And even if it were 5%, cultural renewal cannot be generative if it excludes them. And this is where the stakes become more delicate. When religion is fused with coercive state power, and that power has been exercised ruthlessly, the faith itself risks being associated with repression. We are already seeing signs of this. Some young Iranians do not distinguish between Islam as a spiritual tradition and Islam as an instrument of state control. Their anger has been explosive. This is why it is incumbent upon Muslim scholars and organizations, especially outside Iran, to speak clearly and openly to defend Iranians. Criticizing authoritarianism is not an attack on Islam. Silence, however unintended, can deepen the false equation between faith and repression. The future of Iran requires Muslims to help disentangle Islam from the regime that claims to speak in its name. I believe Muslim thinkers like Abdul Karim Surush have argued for decades that Iran's renewal depends not on erasing Islam, but on disentangling faith from authoritarianism, allowing the best of Iran's Islamic heritage to coexist with its deeper civilizational memory. Now, I have not followed him closely, but what I do know is that he was once an insider in the revolution, but became one of its most thoughtful critics and was ultimately forced into exile. Muslims like him need to speak out more openly in defense of Iranians. So what is unfolding in Iran does not need to be primarily subtraction, though certain coercive practices will need to fall away. It could be integration. But integration requires alignment, and at the moment, the governing system anchors its legitimacy in one moral vision, while large segments of society increasingly draw from another. That divergence is what gives this moment its seismic character. All right, let's return to the chant itself. 3 words, and use them to illuminate the deeper moral divide now unfolding in Iran. Zan, Zendegi, Azadi. It's deceptively simple, but movements do not choose their language casually. Words survive because they carry depth. They endure because they resonate with something older than the moment. Let's take them one at a time. Zan, woman. Why begin with woman? Because in ancient Iran, it was understood that everything begins with women. Women give birth not only to children, but to culture. They are the first teachers of language, memory, rhythm, and story. They transmit values before laws are written. They carry songs, rituals, and moral codes across generations. Why begin with women? Because women are foundational to the future. And in Iran today, women are saying we will not carry forward a diminished inheritance. In the current legal framework, women are not recognized as equals. They inherit half the share of men. Their testimony in certain courts carry less weight. Marriage, travel, and sometimes employment may require the permission of a father or husband. Their dress is regulated. Their bodies are policed. This is not incidental. It shapes how a society defines virtue. Under this regime, girls are taught that modesty equals moral worth. that obedience equals righteousness, that concealment equals purity. Iranian girls are told that virtue is measured by compliance. But women are now asking a deeper question. What is virtue? In the older Iranian moral imagination, women are not moral dependents. They are initiated into the faith alongside boys. They own property, managed estates, officiated rituals. They were addressed directly in sacred texts. They were visible. They were respected. They were entrusted. Virtue was not defined by disappearance. It was defined by alignment with truth through good thoughts, good words, good deeds. So when Iranian women stand unveiled and say Zan, they are not rejecting morality. They are redefining it. They are saying virtue is not the regulation of a woman's body. Virtue is integrity, courage, responsibility, dignity. When Iranian women say Zan, they are not simply protesting a dress code. They are asserting something deeper, that the dignity of women is not negotiable, that the future of Iran cannot be built on their diminishment. Because if women are constrained, cultures contract. If women are trusted, civilizations flourish. Zan is not a slogan. It's a declaration that renewal begins at the source of life itself. The second word is Zendegi, life. Not martyrdom, not sacrifice, not endurance until the afterlife. Life. In the older Iranian moral imagination shaped by Zoroastrian thought, material existence is not corruption to escape. Creation is good. The earth is sacred. Fire is sacred. Water is sacred. Air is sacred. To pollute them is a moral failure. To care for them is a religious act. The world is not a fallen waiting room for heaven. It is something to be cultivated and cherished. The word paradise comes from the old Iranian paradisa, an enclosed garden, a space tended, protected, made to flourish. Zoroastrian ritual does not sanctify suffering. It sanctifies vitality. Nowruz, the Persian New Year at the spring equinox coming in a month, is civilizational poetry enacted. Sprouting wheat, mirrors, goldfish, candles, color, laughter, dancing, weeks of visiting family and friends. It marks the triumph of light over darkness, the promise of renewal after winter. Traditionally, Zoroastrians do not clothe themselves in perpetual black, but in vivid colors. Ceremonies are bright, fragrant, and musical. Life, art, beauty, sensuality. These are not distractions from the sacred. They are expressions of it. And when life is balanced. Long before the Islamic Republic, a central thread in Iranian civilization honored life, not death. In Zoroastrian thought, existence itself is a moral project. Human beings are called to align with Asha, truth, order, life-affirming integrity against Druj, the lie that distorts and corrodes. So death is not glorified, life is. Sorry about that. And that civilizational orientation did not vanish. We see it today. When young Iranians dance in the streets, when women let their hair move freely in the wind, when people sing, when they insist on joy in the face of brutality, they're not being unserious. They are defending Zendegi. They're defending the sanctity of earthly life. We see it most poignantly in how some are now mourning. Across Iran, funerals and 40-day memorials, the Chelom, for young men and women killed in recent protests have become something unexpected. Instead of silent, state-scripted displays of piety, families and communities have chosen to sing, to clap, to play music, sometimes even to dance through tears at gravesides. I think I'm not going to show the next slide, but there's a slide about that. I'm going to keep moving on. Just want to make the point that the Islamic Republic has cultivated a political theology of martyrdom. Murals of fallen boys and keys to paradise handed to child soldiers expected to walk over mines during the Iran-Iraq War. Public ritualizations of sacrifice like Ashura. Legitimacy has been anchored in mourning, in death, in perpetual mobilization against enemies. It's important to note that many Muslim scholars and communities reject this interpretation and articulate deeply life-affirming theologies of their own. But the state itself has sacralized death. So when Iranians chant Zan Zendegi Azadi, woman, life, freedom, they're not importing a Western slogan. They're aligning themselves with civilizational inheritance in which life is sacred, creation is good, and human dignity is woven into the fabric of the cosmos. So Zendegi is not frivolity. It's not a slogan of rebellion alone. It's a declaration of alignment with renewal over despair and life over the worship of death. All right, I have a third last word, Azadi, but I'm going to move on because I think freedom, I think I've made the case that it's not a Western necessarily or invention of the Enlightenment, that it was characterized by how Iran governed itself from the beginning. So I just want to end, I know I'm a little over time, but I want to end with something else. In the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, the epic poem that carried Iran's pre-Islamic civilizational memory through centuries of conquest, the tyrant Zahak is not merely cruel. He is foreign. He is unnatural. He feeds serpents with the brains of the young. He consumes the future, and someone unexpected rises against him. It is a blacksmith, Kaveh, an ordinary man who has lost 11 sons to Zahak's brutality. When Zahak asks him to hand over his last son, Kaveh has had enough, and he refuses to sign a false declaration praising Zahak when the tyrant agrees to spare his last son. Instead, Zahak tears it apart. He raises his leather blacksmith's apron as a flag, and the people gather. What follows is not chaos, it is restoration. Zahak is eventually overthrown, the foreign usurpers defeated, indigenous rule is restored, and Kaveh's apron becomes the banner of a renewed Iran. That story has endured for more than thousands of years because it speaks to something people recognize instinctively, that tyranny is not natural, that when power feeds on the young, it has severed itself from moral order, and that when ordinary people refuse to bless falsehood, restoration begins. The 11th slide, please. Today, that story is being invoked again, only this time, perhaps Kaveh is a woman. Her banner is her headscarf, lifted into the wind. And what she rejects is not merely a law, it's diminishment, it's enforced forgetting, it's guardianship over conscience. And when ordinary people refuse to sanctify falsehood, something irreversible begins. Iran has crossed the threshold, not because the regime has fallen, but because its moral authority has fractured. Repression may continue, prisons may fill, fear may still operate, but when legitimacy cracks at the level of identity, power cannot fully repair itself. What we are witnessing in Iran is not absorption of foreign ideals. It is a society turned towards its own moral foundations. Perhaps T.S. Eliot captures this paradox well. We arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And when a people recover their inheritance, when dignity finds its voice, when women stand undiminished, when life does not bow to death, when conscience insists on freedom, history does not simply continue. It bends. Thank you.
Oh, Sousan, my dear friend. Can you hear me?
I can.
That was absolutely magnificent. I can't tell you, I'm sitting here, I feel like I've got electricity running through my system, and I feel like I've experienced a renewal. So your words are, and the way you explain this, I mean, you and I have talked about Zoroastrian principles many, many times, but this time you have really made clear, I mean, this whole idea of celebration of human life and the whole idea of, trying to remember that sanctity that the Zoroastrian Persian culture was built on, and how we have a blueprint for it, for the future of this planet. We need these principles right now, everywhere. And I think you're going to lead that charge. I really do. I think you have the insight, you have the knowledge, you have the passion, and you go, girl. That's what I'll say to you. You go, girl. All right. So
thank you.
I don't know what's the matter with me. You see my screen? It looks very weird here.
It's because you're so electric.
I'm on fire. That's what it is. Okay. So I'm going to, let me see if I can get that back. well, anyway. Oh, there we go. Well, anyway. Let me just read a couple of these.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I can't look like that. Hold on a second. Okay. So you don't need my face there anyway. So Paula Gutlove, one of our dear.
Hi, Paula. Yes.
She has written that it is so good to see you again, Sousan. In addition to our time together in Cambridge, you might recall that we were together in Tehran in 2008.
I do. Very well.
Thank you for this deeply moving and informative presentation. How best can those of us outside Iran support the women life freedom movement? What are your thoughts about the threatening U.S. military intervention?
Those are a lot of good questions. First of all, Paula, so wonderful to hear your voice through Donna. And I do remember very well our time in Iran together. It was a very, very special time. The last time I was in Iran was in 2014, by the way. I haven't been able to go back since then. So the first question of what to be done outside of Iran, people outside. First of all, I hate to say this because I'm a very positive person, but don't support this regime. This regime is done. It does not represent the people. There's no negotiating with this regime. I know there are good people within this regime. I've met good people within this regime, but this regime is done. And it needs to be given a way to leave Iran and to liberate Iranians. So that's the first thing. Don't make excuses for it. Don't think, oh, well, if we can just, be supportive, maybe the moderate voices will come out. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. I mean, I'm all about diplomacy. I worked in the State Department. I used to want to be a diplomat. I believe in diplomacy as the first. I believe in calling people in, not calling people out. But what this regime has done has gone beyond the pale at this point. And it's clear from the numbers that Iranian people do not want this regime. If this regime was willing to do a referendum where it asked its own people, an honest referendum, what it wants, and to follow through, then that's okay. But this regime will never allow for anything to replace it. So there's no way to support this regime. So negotiating with the regime, I think, is betraying the Iranian people. So that's the first thing. A question about military intervention. Of course, I don't want military intervention. Of course, I don't want boots on the ground in Iran. And yet, many Iranians within the country are asking for the help. We intervened in Bosnia. We intervened in multiple cases. This regime has been so brutal to its people. So of course I don't want military intervention. And a part of me wants us to still act militarily in some capacity, because how are the people going to possibly deal with empty-handed? They have no arms, and this regime has used military grade arms against these people. And not only is it shooting its own people, but it has brought people from Iraq, from Lebanon in the past, from its proxies to do the shooting because it can't trust its own trust Iranians to kill Iranians. So this is a brutal regime and does not represent the Iranian people. And so something needs to be done. That's what I think.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. Thank you.
I hope so.
So another wonderful friend of ours, Ariel Hanan. I mean, I don't know if you know her, Sousan.
Sure, I know Ariel. Of course I do. Rabbi Hanlon, yes.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. She was a student of mine at Columbia. Anyway, she just writes poetry with a big heart. So there's that.
Thank you.
I think we'll probably have time for one more. And this person, Mehran Safari, perhaps. Sorry if I messed up your name. Thank you so much, Dr. Abadian, for your webinar and speaking out against Islamic Republic of Iran. What can we do abroad to help our fellow Iranians back home who are under traumatic actions of the regime? I think you certainly addressed that with Paula's question too, but maybe you want to say something more to Mehran.
Thank you, Mehran, for being here and for taking the time to listen to this. I know it's so demoralizing that we can't do more for our people in Iran. I think Iranians are doing something important. They're speaking up. There are many Iranians speaking up against this regime on LinkedIn, on Instagram. The fact that we're demonstrating in the streets. I mean, I'm so proud of how the Iranian diaspora has demonstrated. I don't know if the non-Iranians know this, but hundreds and thousands poured into streets all over the world, and in peaceful protest against this regime. And they even cleared litter. They gave flowers to police officers. So I'm proud. This is the way that the Iranian people from within the country know that we have not abandoned them. That they are in our hearts and our minds. We can, I know Iranians are providing trauma relief, online trauma relief workshops and things to Iranians. We need to amplify their voice in outside of Iran, and to not make any excuses for this regime.
Okay, Sousan, I think we do have time for just one more. And this is from, oh boy, Kianush Kasawi.
Kianush, yes.
Okay. Given the ongoing woman life freedom movement and the broader debate over Iran's political path, how do you see the role of religion, particularly Islam, shaping Iran's future governance, leadership, and society?
It's not my decision, obviously. This is my hope is that we have a transitional government that allows for a referendum where Iranians get to decide. But what I imagine is that what I hope for is an Iran that's pluralistic and allows all religions to flourish within boundaries. Pluralistic, but no, there's no room for jihadism in Iran. There's no room for certain extremist factions in Islam in Iran or any other. I don't think they should be in any country. So within certain guidelines of values, woman, Azadi, freedom, and life, any religion is allowed, of course, but within certain parameters of values. So whether Iran, Islam, I don't care what you call I don't care what religion we ascribe to, as long as we ascribe to certain values and principles, whatever we call ourselves. I think we're moving to a future, frankly, where religion is going to, the religion is going to mean less, and values, anyway, people are more spiritual rather than religious, in other words, that the values are more consonant rather than identification with a religion.
Okay, Sousan, I'm just curious, there's a whole new movement here at Harvard, the Human Flourishing Program. And
yes, I love it.
Matt Lee, and yeah. Well,
yes.
I think this is a blueprint. I think the Zoroastrians not only came up with ideas about how to flourish as human beings, but they actually lived it. And there is such a profound history of what life looks like when all of these values that you've named, women, life, freedom, when they are materialized in everyday life. And I think that is the blueprint for flourishing. So I encourage you to connect up with the Human Flourishing Program.
I love to.
You've got the answer. And meanwhile,
I just want to say one thing. We Zoroastrians haven't done it perfectly. And we have overreached at certain points in our societies, and but what's beautiful is this stuff is in our religion. Even if we've gone against our religion at times, we have the religion itself, the doctrines represent this material. So just say we Zoroastrians are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. So, but thank you.
All right, now my friend and colleague Nicole Bryant needs to just say a few words about some upcoming events. And Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wow. Well, thank you, Sousan, for such a wonderful presentation, and Donna for your excellent facilitation. As ever, a real treat for all of us who have been joined into this webinar today. I would like to just say a word about what's coming up next for PON Live. As you can see, we have a variety of events already scheduled in March. Our next Kelman seminar will be March 10th, and then 2 PON live book talks on March 26th and 31st. So a busy spring schedule for events and other virtual events being scheduled in the later months in spring, as well, of course, as all of our courses that are open for enrollment now in negotiation, mediation, conflict resolution. So we look forward to seeing you at another online event, or perhaps at a course online or in person here in what is now very snowy Cambridge, Massachusetts, but will eventually thaw out in the coming months. So thank you again to the excellent PON staff for all of their work, and to our fantastic speaker and Donna for her leadership. We wish you all well and hope to see you very soon. Thank you.